Hello and welcome to Wellness Wednesday. I'm James Currie with the Communication Department here at MCHD. I'm talking to Dr. Mike Hoppe. He's the senior pastor of Saraland United Methodist Church. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Uh, Never better, as they say in the song, never better. We have been doing this series on the Enneagram, which is the personality profile. There's 9 different types. If you want to kind of run through them, briefly.
That's right. As for an overview of the 9 Enneagram types, there are 9 types that after you take the test, you can identify yourself and which particular type that you have. And I think it's good. It's good to do that. It's helpful. This is the last in the series. We're talking about all of them. So anybody can look back at some of the previous videos that were on Wednesdays and find their type if they've taken the test. But overall, the Enneagram is a test that helps to understand how you see the world and how you perceive the world, and then also to understand how other people can perceive the world and to work on your relationships together.
That is right. Today we're talking about 9, which is the Peacemaker. I've got a little bit here written about the 9s. Sometimes the 9s are called the crown of the Enneagram. It's at the top of the symbol, which is a circle with the numbers all the way around it. And they're called the crown because they tend to have the strengths of 8s, the sense and fun and adventure of 7s, the dutifulness of 6s, the intellectualism of 5s, the creativity of 4s, the attractiveness of 3s, the generosity of 2s, and the idealism of 1s. But having said all that and encompassing everything, sometimes their weaknesses, since they know and they're parts that exhibit all of the others, there's one part that's lacking, which is their own.
Oh yeah.
And that is kind of their Achilles heel, as I've said several times.
Yeah.
They don't have a sense really of their own identity or who they are.
Yeah.
They're perfectly capable with sitting on the sidelines like, no, coach, don't put me in right now. I'll wait for the play to come to me. Maybe they'll throw the ball to me on the sidelines, and then I'll have to do something with it. And that can't be healthy, because when you are just a passive observer of life, life passes you by in a lot of instances.
Yeah. Well, that's right, James. I think, the 9s are the peacemakers. That's what they're called, as peacemakers. And I know every personality type is neither good nor bad. It is what it is, right? There are just 9 of them. But if I have to admit, I kind of like 9s overall. At least the 9s in my life are fun people. They're the kind of people, generally speaking, it's fun to sit down and have a cup of coffee with. They love to be with people, and maybe that's part of their personality as peacemakers, is they are always trying to find how to bring harmony in relationships. And so we said last week in the number 8 that 9s, at least in my experience, and you see more 8s are married to 9s, and that's because I think 9s have that peacemaker ability to put up with the strong-willed personalities of 8s. But the 9s in my life, they're lovable, warm people. And of course, there are different flavors of every type of personality, so I'm sure not everyone is the same, but 9s love, and they're driven towards inner stability. They're driven towards relational stability. And so, as you pointed out, they have so many great characteristics of the other personality types. But one thing that's often said about 9s is sometimes they don't know who they are. They can be chameleons that are like other people in order to bring that stability and harmony in relationships, but sometimes they neglect understanding who they themselves really are, and they can struggle in that area.
Yeah, and it's tough when you are always accommodating and you're always wanting to make peace. They tend to have a tendency to make promises that they can't keep, or say things that they don't mean just to placate somebody. They're pretty happy to just kick a situation down the road. If I don't have to deal with it on Monday, maybe Friday will be a better day for it or something.
Well, and sometimes I found with nines, having worked with lots of self-identified nines, they're agreeable, they're likable, but one of the challenges I found that nines often face is they cannot make a decision on something. And it's not that they necessarily want to kick that can down the road. It's they can't make a decision because they can see the pros and cons of both sides of an issue. And they know how each decision that they could possibly make could affect other people in different ways. And so they get into this feeling of paralysis and they just can't move forward. And so when I've worked with nines before, whether it's in a staff position or even in some of my family members who are nines, to try to help them get to a place of this, okay, you have to just choose something and move forward. So I've seen that as a common issue among some of them.
Yeah, they're accommodating to a unstable degree, where they're afraid if I make the wrong choice, that's going to upset someone else that I really want to get along with, because I want peace at all costs, but peace comes with a cost, and also the opposite side of peace is conflict, and healthy conflict is a part of life. So you can't go through an avoidance of conflict because it exists, and there can't always be peace.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the word fear. And while we haven't talked about the pandemic throughout this video series that we've done on Enneagram, it's interesting to see how the different personality types have responded to the stress and the chaos of the pandemic. What I've noticed among some nines that I know is, well, what we know about all nines is that in those moments of stress, they tend towards a personality, which is a number 6. And what we might think of some of the more maybe the negative characteristics of a 6 is nines in this pandemic. Many of them have taken on those 6 characteristics of fear and anxiety. And so I've seen nines afraid to leave their homes. They're afraid to go outside. They're more than many of the other numbers. And that's just part of their personality type. So in moments of stress, if you see a 9 becoming more anxious than others, then that makes sense. That's part of who they are. That's the place they go when they're stressed. But when then at the opposite side, when nines are in a really good place, when they're healthy, they gravitate more towards the number 3. They're developing themselves, which is a good thing for nines to be able to do, is work on self-development and care about themselves and not just about what other people around them think. They have a lot of motivation and a lot of energy when they're in a healthy place.
Yeah, they've got to be careful to not retreat, to not hide away. Like I've mentioned, sitting on the sidelines waiting for life to just come by.
Right. I want to say one more interesting thing about nines that I've observed, and I guess the research kind of shows that, is that the nines, because they're so likable and so agreeable, you might think, oh, they're not very angry people. But what's interesting is they're in what's called the anger triad. They're in 3 numbers where the anger is at the heart of it, but they don't express a lot of anger, but it's there, and it's deep down and it's bottled up, and what psychologists call it's repressed. So they actually feel a lot of anger, but they don't recognize it. They can't identify that. And that kind of is brewing underneath the surface, underneath that likability. They wish they could express themselves, but they keep it down for the sake of the stability in their life they so much want to have.
Yep, you're right about that. There's a lot of passive aggressive tendencies there. Nines are perfectly content with avoidance and just hiding away. And, if they never speak to you again, they're perfectly happy with that because they've retreated. And that's a passive aggressive thing, to withhold affection or, attention or, communication. Doing nothing is still doing something. And not necessarily positive.
Right.
Now, some of the more famous nines that people may be familiar with, let me go through this list here. Abraham Lincoln, Dwight Eisenhower, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, John F. Kennedy Jr., James Taylor, Janet Jackson, Whoopi Goldberg, Morgan Freeman. So, there's Mr. Rogers as a character. So, you're in, you're not alone, nines, you're in company with, others that, you may see some of those personality, characteristics there.
You always find interesting people, celebrities and historical figures.
Yeah. So yeah, we talked about, when a nine is healthy, they exhibit these qualities, and when they're unhealthy, they exhibit certain qualities. Some personal growth recommendations for nines. Let me kind of go through a little bit of this here. We talked about the tendency to retreat or to be kind of like a sloth. So they've got to be careful to, have regular exercise, which is a kind of a form of self-discipline for them. Just kind of lets them be more aware of their body, their feelings, and to be healthier. Although this may be painful for nines, if their marriage or their relationship has ended in a divorce, or if they're having problems with their children, they must honestly examine how they have contributed to those problems. Even though examining things are very difficult, but they've still got to examine how did they contribute to that. And we had talked about also too that passive aggressiveness, that they need to realize that they do have aggressions, they do have anger, they have anxieties, and they have feelings that they have to deal with. They can't just compartmentalize them and push them down and, like you said, kick the can down the road and wait for it another day. And it's best to get things out in the open and talk to somebody, which leads me to say that.
Can I add one thing before you go on beyond that? I'd like to add to that growth that I think I see a lot of nines struggle, and this is probably one of the hardest things to do, is to directly confront problems. That direct confrontation is really, really hard, and sometimes nines sweep things under the rug, hoping they'll just go away. And there are some places where, if you're maybe a parent, maybe you're a manager of a company or a president, you mentioned a president in your list, that some conflicts have to be directly addressed, and that is a really healthy direction for a nine to work on, to be a part of the organization, the family that they're a part of.
Right. And, they do have a tendency to do what's called triangulation, where they don't want to directly, deal with the conflict. So they bring in a third party to, say, well, tell her I said this, or do this for me because I can't do it. So yeah, there are lots of areas for growth there for nines, for all personality types. Which leads me back to my original segue. If you do need to talk to somebody, if you are having some problems, you just don't know how to get a handle on, why you feel the way you do or what's going on with your life, we do have behavioral health counselors here at MCHD. They're available. You can give them a call, make an appointment at 251-690-8889. But you can also reach out to your pastor, your trusted best friend, a social worker, or someone else you feel comfortable with. But the main thing is, especially for nines, don't say that you will put this off until later. Deal with conflict right away, because it tends to just harbor and fester and grow, and it materializes to a point where you never wanted things to escalate to be had you dealt with it initially. And it's always best.
It's fantastic that the health department offers that, those services. I think a lot of people in our community aren't aware of that. And so may not be someone who's watching the video, but you may know of someone who's watching the video may know of someone who really needs need some care. Maybe they can't even afford to get counseling privately, but the health department is there for all people. And I think that's a fantastic resource that's available for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they can help people talk through issues. I mean, it's not, it wouldn't take a year's worth of time. I mean, it's maybe just, a few times you sit down with someone, 45 minutes at a time, and you'll be surprised how much our counselors can help you in that 45 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can cover to, to be able to help you be your best self, as we like to say, in the behavioral health side of it. Well, Mike, thank you for helping me wrap up this series on Enneagram. We'll be posting links if you want to read some more about nines, or if you want to take the test. You can. The link that we have is the paid test through the Enneagram Institute, but you can just go to Google, and there's a lot of resources out there for free where you can take the test, or you can get a book from the library or watch some other videos on YouTube. But there are resources out there, and we'll be glad to help direct you to those resources.
James, thanks for having me on for this whole series. I've enjoyed all the videos, and I hope it's helped someone out there to learn more about not just the Enneagram, but using the Enneagram to learn more about the self that they are, that God created them to be, and the relationships that they have in their life.
Mind, body, and spirit. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for being our resident expert, Mike.
Glad to help any way I can.
All right. Thanks for watching Wellness Wednesday.